Hello and welcome. In the previous videos and courses, we have finished creating our essential application. And that's a great thing on its own. However, we would now like to introduce our application to our friends and colleagues, for example, to manage their own projects in our app. But we would still like to continue working on it, or maybe we want to update our application. And preferably, we don't want to do this in a live environment. So the environment we've been building in is a very nice environment, but you want to keep that separate from the environment you are building in. And we can do that by introducing sandboxes. So let's dive into my BettyBlocks, the environment that hosts our application. So press on your image in the left bottom of your dashboard and press My BettyBlocks. And there you open up your application in the My BettyBlocks environment. So the first thing we are going to do is we're going to press this Create New Sandbox button. And this is where we can create a sandbox of our application. And a sandbox is basically a playground. We can make a copy of our application in which we can continue developing, in which we can make all kinds of changes. And if we like it, we can push the changes we made in our sandbox, in our playground, to our live production environment. And if we don't like it, we can just remove it and make a copy of our production environment again. So let's call this sandbox development. There we go. So I'm going to create the sandbox. And as I explained, a development sandbox will now be created. This is a copy of our production environment. And within this sandbox, from now on, we are going to make changes, allowing the people building in our production or working in our production environment to continue working there without any drastic changes or visual changes all of a sudden appearing, because that would work pretty much against their way of working, of course. Two other things before we're diving into the sandboxes. If you would like to invite someone else to build in your application, either in your production environment or in your development environment, you can press the user icon, or you can press the dots and then go to user management. And in here, you can invite builders for your application. You can do that by pressing the invite users button. Here you can invite a new user, and you can invite this user as a user or as a builder. Send invite. And now the user will receive an email saying that he or she has been invited to your application. A reminder, once you have created a sandbox, your application cannot be used for building, your production application. You can only build in the lowest sandbox. So if you create an acceptance environment, a testing environment, and beneath that a development environment, the only place you can work and develop in is your lowest environment. So keep that in mind. So whilst waiting for our sandbox to be created, this can take a little while because we have created a nice application, of course, with data models, pages, etc. The bigger your application is, the longer it might take for the copy to be made. It's precise and very, very clean process, so we need to wait for it a little. Let's dive into the application settings for some last checks before changing something and going deeper into sandboxes. So the application settings can be found by pressing on the dots and going into the settings. Within the application settings, there are all kinds of advanced settings that we can dive into, but let's not do that right now. What we are going to do is we're going to look at some of the basic options that we can change to make working a little more fun and easy in our application. We can change the icon and the background when loading in the application by clicking on either the icon or the background and pressing an icon or an image that you would like to use. So there we go. I'm going to use this and another image. You can also change the name of the application in the name segment, or the identifier of the application. The identifier is the URL used to load up your application. Be careful when changing this, because if other applications are referring to your application, or if you have saved your URL specifically to this application, then if you change this, the URL won't be functional anymore. You can also change the organization which your application is hosted in. And then there are some other change options. Here you go. You see the logging option. Leave the logging on unless you're going to turn your application into a big live production environment. Then you do not want logging turned on your application, on your production application, that is. Because logging keeps track of certain numbers, of certain actions, and the status of the actions. It's really nice to have a look at that every now and then if you want to know if everything is going according to plan. However, what you do want to turn off is private data mode. We have now created an application with a login functionality. That means that if we are allowing someone to work in the front end of our application, that person can now register their account, sign up to our application, and create items in our front end. For someone to dive into the back end or the builder modus of our application, they need builder rights. And we now know how to invite someone to our application. So you can turn private data mode off. If you keep private data mode turned on, then only people invited to your application as a builder are allowed to log into the front end of your application. So it's an extra layer of security in case you want to use your application and allow people to register themselves without them being a builder in your app. Turn off private data mode. So save the changes and we can go back to our project. And as you can see, our development sandbox has been created. So let's dive in there and let me show you what a sandbox precisely does. Press the open application button, and here you can see we are now in our development environment for the project management application. We can click on the pages section and we can see all the pages that we have created previously. We can see some data models that we have created previously, and this is an exact copy. We are from now on only allowed to build in this environment, and that also means that if we make a small change, so for example I'm going to the project model and I'm going to add the on hold value to my status. So let's go. I'm going to give this the grape purple color. So now I have changed something within my data model. So let me close this. I've saved the change. And now I can go back to my BettyBlocks environment and we can have a look at the merge plan. So you can do that by pressing the arrow pointing upward. And here the merge changes will load in. So as you can see, we have made one change, which is precisely what I did. And now whenever I press merge changes, I get a prompt saying, hey, what are you going to call this merge, and give it a short description so that other people who are looking into the merges can see whatever you've done. And you're basically asking, or you're basically going to make a change from your development sandbox to your production environment. They're both equally the same, except for this one change I've just made, and I'm going to push this change up to my production environment. So merge changes, status change, press merge changes, and then we wait for the merge to happen. The status of the production environment is being changed to this application is being updated, so we're not allowed to dive into this application for a short couple of seconds. Once the merge has been finished, we can open up our production environment again, and here you will also see that a pop-up will appear saying this application has a sandbox, changes won't be saved here. Again, meaning that you cannot build in your production environment anymore because we're going to allow people to use this environment from now on. So let's dive into our data model, to the project model, and open up status. And as you can see, the on hold list value has now been added here as well. So let's dive back into my BettyBlocks. After you finish your application, you now know how to invite users into your backend by inviting them either as a builder or a user. You can invite them for your production environment or for any sandbox that you create separately. You know how to create a sandbox and what you need to do to merge, and definitely recommend creating sandboxes because it keeps both environments safe. And if you do something in development that you don't like, You can easily press the select buttons, delete the sandbox, and create a new sandbox based on your production environment again. It's that easy. So from now on, you have an official project, you have a big application ready to use. You can send people your front-end URL and they can use your project management application.